future tax rates. Okay, so if that were the scenario, then they are probably better off to defer it and pay some tax later. But what if the present tax rate is lower than the anticipated future tax rate? Think about it. Could tax rise in the future? Surely. If that were the case, then we are probably better off to pay some taxes, at least some taxes today, so that in the future, we don't have to deal with higher tax rates. Now, let's not forget about what I mentioned earlier, right? Inflation. Because think about it. For a $75,000 lifestyle today, that will be equivalent to $150,000 in 24 years at a rate of 3% inflation. Let's not forget about required minimum distribution. Think about it. If you have $1 million in your 401k, you are forced to take your required minimum distribution currently at age 72. So that is forcefully forcing us to take income out that are taxable. Okay. And of course, the whole idea about financial growing financially is so that we can have the lifestyle that we so desire, right? What type of lifestyle? And oftentimes the lifestyle requires money. Okay. So what is that ideal lifestyle? Only you and your family would know that. Everybody is different. So I'm not saying which one you should approach it because I don't know your situation, but you want to measure yourself what your tax situation would be at retirement and pay your taxes accordingly today. But ultimately, the simple rule of thumb is to balance it out so that you're not overdoing it one way or the other. All right. So, but a lot of people say, though, that when I retire, the likelihood is that I will have low tax brackets. Why? Because I no longer have income. Well, let's take a look. These are the historical tax bracket over the last 60 years. So in 1960, the average middle class income was between $36,000 to $40,000, and they paid a tax rate of 53%. Fast forward 25 years in 1985, adjusting for inflation, that same $36,000 income was equivalent to $62,450 in 1985. Okay. Now, in 1985, that middle class income paid 42% tax rates. Fast forward another 20 plus years, in 2001, that average income paid a federal tax rate of 28%. And last year, that tax rate dropped to 24%. What is my point? My point is that can you possibly imagine that this trend can continue to go down? Or is it about time that the country forcefully would one way or another have to increase taxation? Because taxation just needed to pay for infrastructure, Social Security, Medicare, et cetera, okay? So do your math. Don't assume that you are at the lowest tax rate, that the tax will continue to stay low, because the likelihood is that you will increase. So even though that when we retire, our income could be lower, however, our tax rates could likely be higher at that moment in the future. All right. The next category I'm going to be talking about is the real estate. I know that we have a lot of people in my audience today. We have 375 people in the audience. I appreciate that. I know a lot of people love real estate, because it's visible, it's familiar, it's relatively safe, etc. And for some people, they think that it provides passive income, which up to a certain extent, it may, not exactly passive, but it does provide us a steady stream of income in the form of rental income. So let's talk about real estate investing and taxation. So I have an actual example. This is from one of our colleagues in San Diego. And I believe that this is actually his house, his actual transaction. So he bought his house in 2010. He bought his house in 2010 for $420,000. Now, approximately 10 years later, 8 years later, actually, 2018, he sold his house. And the market price, I don't have exactly his house, but in his neighborhood, close to $700,000. So let's just assume that his house was sold for $700,000. So 2010, he bought it for $420,000. 2019, he sold it for $700,000. Okay. If we were to do the mathematical formula to calculate that average annualized return, that would have given me 5.84. Okay. Now, obviously, we have to subtract the cost, the commission for the agent, the closing costs, et cetera, et cetera. So after commissions and closing costs, that rate of return is 5.05. Okay. So that is not very high in itself, but the point in today's discussion is about taxation. So for this rate of return, do you all agree that we have to pay taxes on it, correct? So assuming that we are going to adjust for a 15% federal long-term capital gain and a 9% state tax, assuming that, well, this house is in California, so they would have to pay 9% or a little bit more than 9%. So after adjusting for my federal and my state taxes, that rate of return is only 3.4. It barely beat inflation. So what I want to convey to everybody, I'm not saying that real estate is good or bad. All I'm saying is that we need to calculate with the total after everything net return. Okay. And oftentimes, more often than not, is that I see that most people neglected or forgot to account for the impact of taxation. Now, let's talk about rental property. Rental property, a lot of people, in the past, this was law in the past that has changed, that says that, well, I can utilize the personal exemption for rental if I were to convert it into primary resident, okay? Because in the past law was that if I were to live the past 3 out of the last 5 years, I can claim the entire exemption of up to $500,000 for a married filed jointly. Okay, if you're single, it's $250,000 exemption. Okay, so let's take a look at the current law right now. The current law. So let's assume that we bought a house for $600,000, and we sold it in about 10 years later for $800,000. So between my sale purchase price and my sold price, $200,000 gain. Okay, now during the first 5 years from 2009 to 2013, I utilize it as a rental. I rent it out. Okay, so we know that on rental income, we have to take depreciation by law. Okay. So assuming in this example, the total amount depreciated was $75,000. $75,000. Okay. Now, in 2013, I decided to move back into this house because I anticipated eventually I'm going to sell and I want to claim that exemption. So from 2013 to 2018, I'm going to use it as my primary home. Okay. Now, so altogether, I had this house for 10 years. 10 years. I made $200,000 on the gain. So from the 2009 to 2013, that was a rental. That is considered a non-qualified use. Therefore, I cannot take the exemption. That's 5 years right there. Now, from 2014 to 2018, that is the last 5 years, the second 5 years. That is my primary use, primary resident. So that is a qualified use. So the ratio between the non-qualified and the qualified is obviously 5/10, which is 50%. So for the sale of $200,000 in gross gain, I can only take that ratio or 50% as an exemption, which is $100,000. So $100,000 in this gain would be exempt from taxation, but the other $100,000 will be subject to taxation. So let's take a look. My total gain, my gross gain was $200,000. The exemption was $100,000. Okay, so that other $100,000 will be considered a long-term capital gain. So I have to pay that that long-term capital gain rate. And in my example, I'm going to use 15% for the majority of us, 15%. Now, remember that we had that $75,000 depreciation. That $75,000, I cannot take a long-term capital gain. It has to be counted as my ordinary, okay? And in this example, I'm just going to use my 25%, okay? So that $100,000 in the net gain after the exemption, I assume that I'm going to pay the long-term capital gain of 15%. In that example, I paid $15,000 long-term capital gain tax. The $75,000 for the depreciation, I'm paying in this example 25% assuming. Okay, so that number will be $18,000 for the tax recapture. Just between these two taxes, I have accumulated $33,000 in tax bill. Now I live in California, so the total pool of money between my exempted after exemption gain and my depreciation multiplied by my tax rate in California, assuming 9.5, that's another $16,000. Added together, just these two taxation added together, my tax liability would be $50,000. So remember, I made gross $200,000. I had to pay the agent's commission, and on top of that, I had to pay $50,000 in taxes. So let's make sure that we consider that. Now, how about this? How many of us have considered a 1031 exchange or say, well, Sam, that is an easy solution because I can simply exchange it for a bigger house? Is that true? Well, let's take a look. Let's say that I'm an investor. I buy a small house. It's my first house. I bought it for $200,000. Okay. Over time, I decided to sell it, and because I don't want to pay the taxes, all I have to do is buy a bigger house, like kind. I cannot buy a commercial building, for example. So in this example, let's say that I upgraded and I bought another property for higher value, $400,000 in this example. In this example, then I would not need to pay no capital gain for the time being. Okay, so that is tax deferred. Now, further down, that I decided to say, hey, I'm going to sell my middle house, $400,000. I'm going to buy yet a bigger house. And I'll do another 1031 exchange. And now my next house I bought it for $800,000. Now this is my dream home, for example, and I haven't paid a dime in taxes yet. Okay. Now let's remember, eventually I have to sell the house, correct? So let's say that over time, eventually I sold the house at $1.6 million. Okay. So let's remember this though. What is my cost basis? Well, remember, my original cost basis was $200,000. Okay, now I sold it at $1.6 million. So what is actually my long-term capital gain? Well, the basis would have been $1.4 million in gains, correct? Now, at this rate, I am not able to pay 15% anymore. Why? Because I have $1.4 million. It's already the highest tax bracket, including the surcharges that put me at a long-term capital. Remember, it's still long-term capital gain, but it's no longer 15. It's 23.8. So from that $1.4 million in gain multiplied that by that rate, I paid $333,000 in taxes. Now, what if I never did the 1035? I keep saying 1035. I am so used to talking about the 1035. It's the 1031 for the real estate. 1035 is for insurance. All right. So what if I did not choose to use 1031? So on my first house, when I sold it, I did not immediately buy my second house. Okay. So on that gain of $200,000, let's assume that my $200,000 I can pay 15%. So that gain I paid $30,000. The next house, now I have a bigger gain, right? I made $400,000, so my capital gain is a little bit higher. It's at 18.8. Not bad. I'm still paying $75,000 from that long-term capital gain still. Now, eventually, the last one that I have to sell. Well, now I'm the highest long-term capital gain. Remember that I made $1.4 million, right? So let's say that I sold it at that time. 23% of all of that gain for the last one is $190,000. I'm going to add these three taxes together. So let's see, $30,000 plus $75,000 plus $190,000. Total equals $295. Would you be surprised? That actually by not using 1031 is actually in this example, it's more beneficial because we end up saving $37,000 because this is 295 versus 330. Now, is this always going to be the case? No, that's not what I'm saying. But my point is 1031 is unique in every situation, but it's not always as efficient or as desirable as we think. Of course, today I'm not showing this slide, but a lot of people say, well, I'm never going to sell this house. This house I'm going to live here until I die, and then I'm going to pass it to my kids, and then my kids can simply take the step up cost basis. Okay. By the way, that law is subject to change. It's being proposed in Congress. We don't know if it go away or not. If it does go away, that will be a huge, huge tax burden for our future generations if we never sold our home and we let it gain and pass it on to our children eventually when we pass. Okay, so let's remember this. All right, moving on. The next I'm going to talk about is the Roth conversion. So for those of us who are not familiar with Roth conversion, let's just go ahead and go over that definition. Okay, so a Roth conversion is really, really simply taking all or part of the balance of our IRA or 401k and convert it to Roth. It's as simple as that. If I have a IRA or 401k, I'm going to take some money out. I'm going to pay taxes today, and I can convert it to a Roth IRA. Okay, now we will have to pay the taxes on that conversion that very same year of the conversion. So in today, 2021, if I decided to convert $50,000 to my Roth account for my 401k, then I would have to pay tax on that $50,000, which is the amount of conversion. Currently, the law does not have limitations on the conversion. Okay, and I suspect that this is one of those laws that is probably not going to change. Why? Because Uncle Sam would be very, very happy with open arm for you to pay your taxes today. Okay, so I doubt that this law would go away anytime soon or will be changed. So essentially, that is what Roth conversions are. Now, let's take a look at the potential changes under the Biden tax plan. Okay, now anything below the 32% tax brackets currently being proposed is going to go unchanged. This is for married filed jointly. Okay, so for families making about $400,000, that's where the proposal comes in play. That is pushing the Biden proposal is pushing to increase the tax rate from the 35 and the 37 to go all the way up to 39.6. That applies for both married and individual household. Now, again, a lot of people will say, well, our family income is nowhere near $400,000. Sure, it's possible. The reality is that we do not know what the future holds with the way the country is. Let's take a look, right? So currently, the biggest expenditure is the Social Security, the entitlement, the three big entitlement plans, right? The social programs. The Medicare, the Social Security, and the Medicaid. In California, is the Medi-Cal, right? So think about it. Why is this going up? Why is the tax going up more and more? Why do you guys think that the taxation is going to go up further and further? Well, the answer is very simple, because people are living longer and longer, right? So we have to pay, the government needs to pay that Social Security for as long as we live. So it's very, very different. It's a lot different burden for the government if I live to 75 versus if I live to 95. And as we age and we live longer and longer, that burden becomes more and more for the country, correct? So as we can see, this is the actual up to and the projected. As you can see, the tax revenue that is come in is going to, this is what is projected currently if there are no changes. So think about it. Is this possible? If all the programs are continue to consume more and more expenditure, the likelihood of taxes that must go up is just very, very realistic. Okay. Now, I don't want to say that is across the board that will impact everybody, but for the majority of middle class and above family, that will probably be the case. Now, the last reason I want to share with everybody about the Roth conversion, why is that beneficial? Okay, and this is very important. It's because in the past, the law allow that any inherit IRA, let's say that if my parent passed away and I inherited their 401k, in the past I could have spread that inheritance over my lifetime. But guess what? The current law, it has narrowed that gap to 10 years, which means that inherited amount must be taken out within 10 years maximum. So think about it, everybody. I got 383 people listening to my to my presentation today. What is the normal situation for normal families? A parent passing away, let's say 80, 85 years old. Is that fair? How old is the children at that point? Roughly speaking, usually it's about 50, 60 years old. okay, not yet retired, and usually at the highest income level in a family. Correct? I'm 50 years old. I'm in my best years right now. Correct? Now, all of a sudden, if my parents left me with $500,000 or $1 million in 401k or IRA, now I have to take that over 10 years. I want to ask everybody, which year do you want me to take that 10 year that inheritance? I got $1 million that I need to consume it in 10 years. My question to everybody is that which year would you want me to take it? The last year or the first year or spread out over 10? No matter how you look at it. If it's the $1 million and I chose to spread it over 10 years, that simply adds $100,000 to my income while my income is the highest at that point. I'm in WFG, I'm making $500,000. On top of that, I need to add another $100,000 because I need to cover for that inheritance. So that is another reason why we want to start doing this conversion so that we can spread over time. Why? Because all of us will leave at some point. And the majority of us have 401k. And the majority of us will leave that 401k for our future children. And the majority of our future children or our children will probably do quite well in life. So when they're in their 40s, 50s, they're going to be at the peak of their income. You know, you add fuel to the fire. It's great to have income, but a lot of it is going to go to taxation, correct? So that's another reason why we want to start doing a little conversion. So that same scenario, if I have that $500 million 401k, but I converted 50% to Roth, guess what? That 50%, when I pass away, I leave that $500,000 that half to my children. Now they don't have to be taxed upon because it's already taxed over my lifetime. Okay. All right. Next topic. The wealthy's plan for the middle class. I put it in parentheses, right? So let's take a look. So I'm sure a lot of us probably seen this pie chart and this bar chart, right? So 50%, or over 50% of the assets inside of life insurance plans is owned by the top 10% of the wealthiest American. Isn't that interesting? Top 10% of wealthy American owns the majority of life insurance proceeds. Why is that? Why is that? They're wealthy already, right? Why do they need a life insurance? Well, guess what? Because of taxation. And since 1987, over the last, until 2007, over this 20 year, the bigger size policies, the over $1 million policies have steadily increased, right? Who buys $1 million policies? Who buys over $2 million face amount policies? Usually the wealthy, right? So why are they doing this? Well, let's take a look. We talk about the wealthy's compensation, correct? So this is Jim Harbaugh, and I'm a football fan. I live in San Francisco. Jim Harbaugh used to be the coach for the San Francisco 49ers. He was lured away by Michigan, the University of Michigan, for $25 million contract, okay, per year, by the way. So guess what? This is in 2017, and Jim Harbaugh's package included, he was one of the highest paid coaches at that time, probably still is. So his contract included an IUL in short, okay, which allowed the IUL appeals to many executive or business owners because of the advantage they provide. IULs allow cash value within the policy to grow tax-free over time. They are funded with after-tax dollars and allow the client to withdraw money tax-free at any age. Now, I want to be careful. This should be withdraw money via policy loans. I think Forbes did not go to that extent, but those are the details. The bottom line I'm saying is that this is obviously a very wealthy man, and this is a plan for a wealthy person. Now, let's take a look. If you're not convinced about this, let's take a look, right? So that was from that pie chart. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. All right. So this is another article. This is back in, this is recent. I can't remember when this was. It was very recently as well. So there was a mystery. You know, the biggest IUL purchase was in $200 million face amount. $200 million face amount on our IUL. There's suspicions that that's probably Elon Musk, blah, blah, blah. The point I want to mention is that why are wealthy people buying life insurance? Why are corporations setting up their highly compensated people for this type of plan? Obviously, there is a reason, and one of the biggest reason is the tax benefits inside life insurance. Okay, now a lot of people will say, well, I am no Elon Musk, I am no Jim Harbaugh, I don't make $25 million a year. So how does this apply to me? Well, let's take a look. That's why my title for this section is the wealthiest plan for the middle class. I suspect the majority of us are middle class, and in this example, I'm going to say I'm somebody who's 41. By the way, I'm not. I wish I was, but I'm not. So somebody who's 41, let's say that this person, instead of choosing to save into the 401k maxing out, he's going to balance it out. Okay, he's going to save say $20,000 into his IUL plan. Actually, this is a BUL, by the way. This is a BUL. So assuming this person saved $20,000, okay, that's not too much. That's not too little. I hope that's for middle class over 10 years. Okay, so this person saves into this plan $200,000 into the plan. Okay, the total invested. Now, for a rate of return, I'm going to assume a 7.5 gross and 6.85 net return after expenses. Okay, so this is not very high. This is not very low. This is the historical. It's an average, reasonable rate of return over time. Assuming I'm running this illustration at 6.85, this column would have become my cash value, which is my portfolio return. Okay, so by the time I'm 65 years old, my $200,000 investment growing at a rate of 6.85 would have grown to be $598,000 at 65. Now, remember though, right? This was a life insurance plan. Therefore, at any given time, it has a life insurance death benefit component. So God forbid, if I were to have an accident or something like that I pass away unexpectedly or prematurely, my family is always protected. In this example, with this last column will be the payout to my family. Okay, now let's fast forward now. Assuming I did not die, I'm alive and well, healthy. Let's say that now I am retired, I'm 65 years old. In my example, I'm going to start taking income at 70. So my total invested income is still that $200,000. Guess what? From 70 to 90, over that 20-year retirement lifespan, I'm going to take from this account $50,000 per year for every year for 20 years, and I don't pay a cent of taxes. Okay. Now, along the way, God forbid, if I live too short, any given year, if I pass away, whatever is allowed, it is at the right column, that will be the death benefit paid to my family. Now, what if I live too long? What if I live too long? Well, eventually, after collecting or taking $50,000 for 21 years tax-free, I would still leave my family $950,000 in legacy. I will be the favorite grandfather. I can assure everybody that, right? How much money did I put in? $200,000. How much money have I taken out? $1.1 million in change. How many dollars have I paid in taxes? Zero. Okay. How much money have I left for my family? Approximately $1 million, if not more, across over my lifespan. Yes. All right. So I want to show everybody, that I said, a lot of people say, well, is this too good to be true? Remember, right? Remember, everybody, I'm showing this based on 6.75. 6.75. All right. So I want to show everybody my personal case, my personal plan. This is one of the plan. I have several. Okay. Now I had this since 2008. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to show over the last 6 years. So this was 2015 rate of return. That year, I got a rate of return of 11%, 2015. 2016, that year, it dropped. The market wasn't that good, 5.79. 2017, 4.45. The following year, it rebounded 10.6. 2019, 8.1. The following year, 4.8. And last year, 6.4. As you can see, it's modest. It's modest. Let's take a look. I averaged it out. These are the past how many years? 2, 4, 6, 7 years. Added together, got an average about 7%. About average 7%. Now, remember, this is a life insurance plan. Therefore, it has a cost to it. So a lot of people say, well, I don't want to mix investment with insurance. I want to keep them separately. Or some people say, well, insurance are too expensive. Well, let's take a look. Same plan, same me, same year, 2015, my cost that year was $3,800 for the year. My total cost of insurance. Okay. My cash value for that year was $70,000. Okay. Now that ratio was 5.36%. The following year, 2016, my cost is still about the same, $3,500. In fact, it dropped a little bit, but my cash value increased. Not because it's all returned, because I put in another $85,000 into the plan. Okay, that dropped my ratio, my cost to my policy value. The following year, 2017, I gotta hurry, huh? Well, I got 4 minutes. All right. The following year, I have still $3,400 in costs. Next year, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and the summary. So everybody remember, the cost of insurance is most expensive in the first 10 years, right? So I am 53 years old. How many more years am I going to live? Hopefully another 40. Hopefully, Grace, yeah, you're laughing, right? Anyway, so my point is that, do you guys see that moving forward, every single year moving forward should be about 1%? My point is, I spent about the first 10 years paying above 1, but for the remaining 30, 40 years, I'm paying below 1, and you do the average. Okay, so this is what it pains out. The first 10 years are high in cost. Over the lifetime, the green part is my gain. So my question to everybody is, do I prefer to pay a little cost up front, or do I prefer to pay taxes at the end? Okay. And this is a little comparison about the tax save versus the cost in an IUL plan. Okay. I'm going to be a little fast. Now, the last thing about the cost. Okay. And this is compare, what if this was a mutual fund? A lot of people don't want to do insurance. They want to do mutual funds or whatnot. Assuming if I had a $10,000 in my IRA in a mutual fund account, and my rate of return for that year was 9%. Assuming I had a management fee of 1%, and my taxes on the gain, hold on a second, let's see who's calling, man. It's not a good time to call me. All right. So assuming I'm paying 33% in taxes. All right. So management costs, 33% in taxes, that's 1/3 of 6%, 2%. Altogether is 3%. How much is the cost of $10,000 at 3%? $300. Very low. Over time, over 30, 40 years, if this was a 401k, that $10,000 that I continue to contribute into it, plus rate of return, it grew to be $1 million. Same math. What is my cost at 3%? $30,000. So you do the math. Can this be the cost of insurance? Of course not. And this is just the cost. I'm not even talking about the taxes. Okay. So tax is not a fee, but it must be calculated into our return. All right. So this is by asset class: real estate, mutual funds, and the cost of insurance. On the real estate, I have to account for those type of taxes. These are the typical fees, the average return. Same thing for the mutual funds. I have to pay the taxes. I have to pay for the management fee, the lows, the average return is that, and that's the IUL itself. I want to skip this because I think that we are going to run out of time, and I think most of us probably seen this. I think that what I want to mention though is that this is probably a typical allocation for most families, that we don't have enough on the tax-free buckets. What if we do a minor adjustment and reallocate it in such a way that I still have everything that I want, my real estate, my 401k, my stocks, but I simply increase my Roth, my annuity, that's left for another discussion, another day, and my insurance plan, leveraging that tax benefit. Okay. So last thing is that business. I think that we are here to learn, and this is actually the biggest rate of return if we do the right business. And believe me, it's the biggest tax deduction, because if we work for someone, we pay tax first and then we spend. If we work for ourselves, we spend first, then we get tax. Okay, must be the right business, and I hope everybody, WFG is a good business. All right, so these are some references. You can take a snapshot, YouTube it. It's a lot great. And with that, I want to turn it back to Grace. I'm exactly at 7. I was hoping for some Q&A. I don't have the time, but I appreciate everybody listening. Grace, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you, Sam. Wow, that was a jam-packed,